Hello, and welcome to FPJ Stories with me, Michael Barker. In this, our second episode, I speak to one of the titans of the industry, Christine Tacon. Now, you know Christine as the Groceries Code Adjudicator, former managing director of Co-op Farms. But she's also chair of MDS, which brings through the next generation of young horticultural professionals. Founded a Women in Farming group, which has swelled to nearly 400 members. We're going to talk to her about all of that, her views on the grocery industry today, hear about what she's planning to do next. We'll also learn a little bit about some rather unusual hobbies, and a very successful family member. I hope you enjoy this as much as I do. Good morning, Christine.
Hi. Morning. Hello.
How are you today?
Oh, quite relaxed. I've only just got off the narrowboat at about 5 o'clock last night, so I'm still sort of in holiday mode.
How wonderful! That's a bit of a hobby of yours, isn't it? Do you do that regularly?
Well, yes, we've had the boat probably for 12 years now, and just go off on big journeys every now and then. The big one, we've actually got the logo all down the side of the boat, was when we went to the 2012 Olympics, and we took it from home in Macclesfield all the way down to the Thames at Oxford, and then all the way up the Thames, and we moored on the Regent's Canal, where we were able to walk to the Olympics and also walk to Victoria Park, where we could see it all on those massive screens. And if you remember, there was a huge flurry about getting tickets, but actually you could get quite a lot the night before. So we ended up watching weird things like weightlifting and dressage and table tennis. We learned quite a lot about just doing different things. We just wanted to go to every venue, really.
Yeah, it was a brilliant time. I remember going to the beach volleyball, and it was a bit like watching the Keystone Cops, because they play these sort of mad music in between the points, and it was just like a really fun day out rather than watching top level international sport. Absolutely great memories, wasn't it?
So we've left that logo on the side, and people often say, why have you got that on the side? We said, just to record it. It was just a massive journey. It was such fun. We actually covered it up when we went past the House of Commons. If you remember, there was all this fuss about people putting Olympic rings. Do you remember bakers were told to take the rings out of their window, and we had it plastered down the side of the narrowboat. So we covered it up with a black bin liner when we went past the House of Commons, just in case.
Excellent. So how's your summer been generally? It's obviously been a really extraordinary year from both obviously a personal and a professional point of view. I gather you've been doing a bit of gardening and growing your own fruit and veg, but you also on a work perspective extended your period as adjudicator to help the industry through this crazy time.
Yeah. Well, from a personal perspective, I'm one of these lucky people with a big garden, and generally it runs away with me. So this year I've actually been on top of my vegetables. In fact, because I used to be away from home 3 or 4 nights a week, and this time I'm sort of been looking at my plant, looking at them every day and thinking, you haven't grown. I'm used to sort of coming back and finding I've got to just set to. So that's been a delight. And the other thing is that both of my children are in their early 20s, so you think you've lost them for good, and you'll occasionally have them home for a weekend. But they basically moved back, as did their partners. And so I've sort of become a 50s housewife, sort of thinking what to cook every day and getting stuff out the freezer and planning which vegetables to pull up. So it's been a bit odd, but it's also been wonderful. I'm somebody that always looks for the silver lining in every cloud, and for us it's been wonderful. But I'm perfectly aware for some people it's been absolutely dire. But I think just look at the positives.
Yes, most definitely. And has it made much difference in terms of extending your period as adjudicator? I suppose.
Well, I think that's I was actually due to. I'd been saving up all my holiday, and I was due to go to New Zealand, Hong Kong, Vietnam, in April, May, but I think it was more that things were moving so fast, and the retailers were really just doing everything they could to try and keep their shelves stocked, that I realized that some of the issues that suppliers were going to raise would be horrific for a new adjudicator who was trying to work out what what standards had Christine, you can't judge something that happened in March by a new person's standards in July. They've got to be judged then by my standards and what guidance I've been giving people. And I just felt that was just far too much for anybody new coming into the role. And so felt that if I extended, I actually offered to do it for 2 to 3 months just to sort out any COVID issues, just so that a new person could come in and just focus 100% on looking forward. But because it's a third, you're only allowed, under the law, they can only extend me twice. So I think to be on the safe side, they extended it for 6 months. But then they didn't appoint the new adjudicator on the 25th of June, which that was over a month late. So they were sort of partly using the fact I was there to continue. But, the new adjudicator started now. I've actually said that I won't do very much in August. I'll be there just in case, but I actually want them to get their feet under the table and, work with the new team and think about how they want to do things. But I had been ringing all of the retailers every month to say, have you got any COVID issues? What's coming up? Clearly listening to suppliers if they had anything, and didn't really look like there was anything much coming up. And I think because I knew I was handling it, I was very much on the front foot in putting out guidance and writing to chief execs and telling them this is what I expected. I think that's made a difference.
Yes, most definitely. So, I mean, it's been 7 years since you set up the office. Going back to the beginning, what did you find when you first came into the job in terms of the state of the relationships between suppliers and supermarkets, and how proud are you of how far you've come in that time?
Yeah, it wasn't so much what did I find, because I mean I was in it. I had been at the co-op running the farming business, and we were supplying at some point virtually every one of the retailers that I ended up regulating. So I knew what they were all like to work with. And I think that there were some things that had really annoyed me when I was in the business, such as being told who you had to buy your packaging from, and knowing that you could buy it at half the price that you were being charged, and knowing that there was clearly a backhander going to the retailer. And even within the co-op, when we were growing and packing potatoes for them, and I said, look, I need to know what the backhander is, because it could well be that we're both being ripped off. And they never told me, but they retendered. And interestingly, it went to somebody that supplied it about half the price that we'd been buying for before, which and it was interesting. I spoke to some very, very large fresh produce growers in the UK who said to me, we've been trying to solve this for a year, we've been trying to solve this for 10 years, and in 18 months you cleaned up an industry problem that's been going on forever. And wow. Now anybody can buy, generally all the retailers give you 2 or 3 options to who you buy your packaging from, and the backhanders have clearly all stopped now. So some of the things I just wanted to get in and sort because they had annoyed me. And then other things were new things. The whole issue of forensic auditing, and that being an industry in itself, was completely new to me. So that was quite there was some real education. In terms of how proud I am, I think it's, I only really know that it's got better from what suppliers tell me. And I've had wonderful feedback all along, not very often, but occasionally, when people say, it's really been a difference, and such a retail is unrecognizable from what it was before. And many, I sort of say, well, you never tell me anything. I never hear from you. And they say, no, but it's the very fact that you're there. That's what's making the difference.
Yes.
So yes, I am enormously pleased with how the retailers have changed, and they all worked with me very closely. And I think it was a matter of getting into the mindset that the retailers weren't my enemies, and that the code compliance officers were my allies, and they could work with me inside their businesses to resolve the issues that I was hearing from suppliers.
Yes, absolutely. But does that mean there's still things left to do? You've obviously, we've seen the statistics in the reports that you put out and how high the levels of compliance have gone. Yeah. But there's obviously still a need for the adjudicator, as you say, as much just to have them there watching over as anything. But what still needs to be done in terms of tangible things, do you think?
Well, I think that part of the reason that I decided to stand down, I mean, to be honest, when I started my first term, I said when I started my second term of 3 years, I said this will be my last one, is actually having this big ambition of everything that I wanted to do. And the co-op investigation was a game changer, as was the Tesco one actually, but the Co-op one, it was very clear that all of the issues were to do with corporate governance, that they didn't want these things to happen, but they were happening. And so that really inspired me to then think that, clearly all of the recommendations to the Co-op were going to be to address governance, is to say, well, I want to address the governance with all the retailers. And everybody's got to demonstrate to me that there is no way that a random buyer can go off and do things, or that they implement a new system and nobody realized that this could happen. I mean, the Co-op, so, the order requires all the buyers to be trained, but actually it was the people in the depots that changed the terms and conditions, or it was people in new product development. And it's like, well, how come nobody had identified that there were people in other departments that could impact a code related condition? And I think that was I made all of the retailers go through their own internal analysis to how to make sure that these things couldn't happen in future, and how they had their checks and balances and their audits, and they listened to customer feedback so that they too could amend things. So that was really my whole last year, which I felt was really very much for the new adjudicator, saying, here it is all, it's all packaged up in a nice little parcel with a bow on the top. Now you come along with some new ideas. So I think that it's for them to think about new ways of doing things. There are an awful lot of what I've worked on has actually helped the retailers become more efficient as well. So it's been a win-win for both sides, and that's how we found many of our successes. But I think I would love to have achieved much more in the area of forecasting. So I think if I was to say, if there's another big area of focus, it would be on that, because the win-win for the retailer is to getting availability on shelf. And of course, they all say they've got these big ambitions on waste, whereas actually the biggest waste is probably with their supplier. So if they helped their supplier more, then that could be tackled.
I guess forecasting's never been in the spotlight as much as it is this year, with the incredible challenges that the sector has faced. Has the way that the industry has managed the COVID crisis and done really pretty well in keeping the nation fed, has that underlined just why it's so important that grocers and suppliers work closely together on the same side, do you think?
I hoped you were going to say that. It is all about communication and recognizing, particularly in that packaging example I talked about at the beginning, that the way that things were set up was not actually leading to the most efficient outcome for the supply chain. And actually, if you work on, even things like the forensic auditing with these huge claims, the amount of work going on at both ends to resolve these things, and the angst. I mean, I met in the Tesco investigation some account managers, their role is to manage the account and to smooth things out, but mainly to grow business, identify consumer trends. They were spending 60% of their time chasing payments, resolving payment issues. I mean, talk about a waste. And of course, for every email that's coming from the supplier, there isn't always, but there ought to be a response from the retailer. So the amount of angst at both ends, and drop and drive, the huge change that we've seen on that by moving to good faith receiving has again taken out masses of admin and wasted time. And I think those are the sweet spots, where actually sorting things out for the retailer makes a big difference for both sides.
Yes, most definitely. So, I mean, we could talk about the adjudicator all day, and I mean, there's so many interesting aspects to it, but I do want to talk more about yourself and what happens next. What's your plan once you step down in the next few weeks? Have you got something firm booked up, and what are the kind of the issues that you would like to help tackle for the industry?
Yeah. Well, I haven't got anything sorted beyond the fact that it's only ever been a 3-day-a-week role. So I have had other interests. So I chair MDS, which is the Graduate Training and Recruitment Scheme, and that's been taking a day a week the whole time I've been doing this role, and that's continuing. And I'm also on the board of the AF Group, which is a big farming purchasing cooperative in Norfolk, so that takes a day or two a month. I've also been approached by a few startup businesses, from cannabis to data analysis to water, where I think they're thinking that maybe my connections and I think reputation, I think I add credibility to things. So I think that I seem to have found myself a little niche spot. But I think the thing is, first of all, I've got to decide whether this is something I want to be involved with.
Yes.
So that's what's been coming at me. Whereas had I had hoped, and maybe, when I actually stand down, that people will talk to me about, opportunities, either working within businesses or on consultancy projects or non-executive directorships, which are actually directly linked to the food supply chain, because that's my passion. And if there was something to do with waste, something to do with packaging, those sorts of things really excite me as well. So I'm hoping that when I stop, that somebody might think, we know just the person to come and sort this out, but I don't think they'll necessarily come at me until I stop being the regulator.
Yes, it would
So
certainly make quite a story if you moving into cannabis as your next big move.
Yeah, well.
But it is an extraordinary. The sector has grabbed a number of leading growers, so it's obviously moving, and there are things happening there, but they're not generally too open to talking to the press about it. So I guess it'll come out.
Well, I think it's big. There is a massive, obviously, there's a massive pharmaceutical market, but it's actually the general wellness industry where lots of people are saying it's made a difference to this, that, and the other, and it's about the people that I'm talking to are growing it in Guernsey and they're processing it there. So I think an awful lot of it is grown in quite odd places and you're not really quite sure. I think the key thing about the CBD is you've got to take out the hallucinogenic bit.
Right.
The hallucinogenic bit is actually a very large proportion of the plant.
Yes.
Comes out of the extracts. And I think I think it's when you get the THC out, you can actually take the CBD out as well. So actually a lot of the products on the market haven't necessarily got as much CBD in as they say they have.
Right.
But I think there is no dispute it has medicinal properties.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
And I think it's a matter of how do you control that market such that the medicinal bit is there and the hallucinogenic bit isn't. I mean, even to do with convulsions, I think that the THC is much better at controlling the convulsions than the CBD. So that might be the trace element of that is actually what's doing the work. Anyway, there you are. You can see I've learned a bit.
You've done your pitch for the cannabis jobs there. I'm impressed. You mentioned the NDS management training scheme, and it's a scheme that I've followed closely over a few years. FPJ's sort of sponsored the synoptic papers over the years.
You've been a huge supporter. Yeah.
Yeah, we absolutely love the scheme, and what's really impressed me is how many amazing young executives have come out of it and very rapidly built their career. But I think back to when I started my career in fresh produce, and I'd go to these conferences and people used to absolutely despair that there were no good young people coming through. But I feel like thanks to schemes like MDS and others, that's changing now. Do you feel much more encouraged about the quality of people coming into the sector now?
Well, MDS is unique. You say schemes like MDS, and I think that I'm amazed that it isn't actually duplicated in many other sectors. So, I mean, we spend all year round, for those that don't know about it, we spend all year round recruiting. We will do assessments every week. And we have, at the moment, 15 trainees start every 6 months, every April, every October. And they work for us for 2 years, do 4 6-month secondments in our member businesses, doing very different roles. We make sure they do very different roles and work for very different sorts of businesses. In the meantime, they now do an apprenticeship. So they end up with a level 5 CMI management qualification, and at the end of the 2 years, the member businesses generally fight over who's going to recruit whom. So we now have 60 trainees. We have about 55 members. I've been very pleased to get some retailers in the membership, because I think that anybody working in fresh produce to have spent 6 months in a retailer is very educational. So we have Aldi, Sainsbury's, and Morrison's as members as well. But we also have small asparagus, strawberries, salad growers, as well as some very large ones, and a huge number of service industries. We've got, I think, 5 agrochemical businesses and market research and engineering businesses as well. But we are actually currently being inundated with applications for people wanting to join the scheme.
Amazing.
And I think they see it as 2 years of work experience. All we ask them is to demonstrate some interest in the sector, to which the most boring things is, I like food. But we try and give us some understanding of the sector in the interview, because we're looking for their potential. We're not looking for whether they've already done all of these different works, different roles. And we're inundated at the moment. I think it's the fact it's a 2-year graduate training scheme. It's reasonably well paid, and it gives them 2 years of work experience and makes them highly employable at the end of it. But we are recruiting mathematicians, archaeologists, linguists, geographers. So I love the fact that we're recruiting such a diverse number of people in, as well as people who've done maybe a food business degree or something like that. We are clearly a massive industry, and we have loads of different roles for different types of people. So this works very well. And as I say, following the fact that we've got this big increase in applicants, which I'm sure is because a lot of businesses are massively cutting back, if not completely, on their own graduate training schemes, is really pushing a message out to members saying, you still need people, and you might have cut back on your own graduate training scheme, but this is a very low cost, so it's a not-for-profit organization, and this is a very low cost way of actually having people on secondments, which covers, a lot of people use them to cover peak production, but they might be maternity cover, it might be projects, but then it's a huge pool of talent to recruit from at the end of it. And I've been surprised actually how some of particularly the big people with big graduate training programs are recruiting a lot of our people, because they are different. They're very practical. They've been moved around, sometimes at very short notice, doing 4 completely different jobs. It takes a certain sort of person to do MDS.
Yes, indeed. And I've met them, and they're fantastic. Just really grounded, intelligent, interesting people. Given what you've said about the amount of interest in the scheme there is now, is there potential to expand it further, do you think?
Yeah, well, we will expand at the rate that our members are ready for us to expand. So, and I recognise that we've gone from about an average of about 30 trainees to 60 trainees in the 4 years in which I've been involved. So we've already doubled. We've used this recent lockdown period, when obviously we're all working at home more and able to get on with more things, because we used to spend a lot of time traveling around meeting trainees, which is now all being done virtually. And we've actually put in new systems so that we've actually got the back office now to work bigger. And I think you occasionally need a pause to do that. So we've done that. And now I'm on a bit of a recruitment drive to see if we can get some more members, because if the members come in, we can grow, because we've got the trainees ready to do it. But at the moment, we're just looking at taking on our usual 15 in October. But we've got, I think now that we've got a better web presence, but we're also with all of the virtual contacts and virtual careers fairs at universities, the net's being spread wider, and I think that's why we're getting more people. But we've noticed a recent indication of number of people who are trying to retrain. I think they've clocked the fact that the food industry still needs people, and people who've maybe felt their jobs are insecure are thinking, contacting us and saying, can I retrain? Which is a new way of, we've got a board meeting coming up, and that will be one of the discussions. If do we just take graduates, or do we take people in their 30s and 40s who want to retrain and desperately want to come into our industry?
Yeah, most definitely. So your clarion call, I suppose, to the industry is that companies should come forward, speak to MDS about how they can offer placements and support the scheme to help
come and
get
be a member. It's not expensive, and it works. It's been going since 1986, and the founder members, 2 of them are still members, and one of them's actually recently applied to rejoin. And that's from 1986. Yes, it is something that works well. And yes, we'd love to have some more members, and they can be. I think that the membership's about 3,000 a year. So if you're just a dormant and you don't take people, it's not it's not very costly, but I think that generally when people have got into it, they realize that everybody gets places. Somebody suddenly left. I think also within our industry, I'm hearing that people find that some of their Eastern European managers are now being tempted back home on an equivalent salary to work in maybe sometimes even better conditions than we've had as people are building new premises, where they can then live in a 4-bedroomed house with a garden. And so we're losing some of the Eastern Europeans that have been promoted up. And I think that many businesses are saying to me, we recognize we've got to actually get homegrown talent now. We can't keep relying on Eastern Europeans to come through our businesses. So that's another avenue.
Yeah, indeed. Another group that you've been heavily involved in fact, you were a founder of it, is the Women in Farming group, which, correct me if I'm wrong, grew from 5 members in 2011 and now has nearly 400 members. It's obviously the farming industry's been traditionally male dominated, and it is starting to change. But do you think we're seeing a better environment for women now? And what are still the key issues that women feel that they're facing and challenges in this sector, do you think?
Well, it started off being called Ladies in Agriculture, and people didn't like being called ladies, so we changed it to Women in Food and Farming. So we have all sorts of people represented there, from accountants to vicars. They're not necessarily all farmers. But I think that most of us would say that much of their career, particularly the older ones, you were often the only woman in the room. And I think that it helps that we get these networks and people can have a laugh and a joke about it. And I think particularly with the younger ones, we have all sorts of conversations like, it's really weird about, what's the right time to have children. And, I'm getting married and I don't think my husband really wants me to work. And you're actually thinking in the back of your mind, are you sure you're marrying the right person? But, it's quite, and then I know there's a particular person who's a member who I've known for quite a long while, is at home with 2 children and just going up the wall with wanting to do something. And I put her forward for a job, which she then got. And it had previously been done by somebody who was in their late 70s. So I reckon that one of the things it really needed was an injection of youth and how to get younger people involved. And I was really pleased that she got it. But I think that we sort of help with mentoring each other and putting people forward for things that they didn't realize they could do. It's just, to be honest, it's like just being a good manager, but just maybe some of them haven't got any mentors, haven't got somebody that's actually pushing them in the background. It's a very noisy affair. You put a group of women in a room and the noise level goes up really high. When we have it in the Farmers Club, I don't think they quite know what's hit them. But it's just a network. I mean, I wish it could be mixed, but I think it works. The fact that it's all women, and a lot of people come because they do feel that they are still very much on their own. And clearly, if anybody, to be honest, if anybody in the network or outside the network rings me and wants a little chat about their career, I wouldn't think twice about doing it.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of your own career, you've had obviously a very extensive career in the food industry, but looking
Does that make me sound old?
Not at all.
Good, okay.
But I was looking back at where you started. You actually qualified as a production engineer. And your first role, at least on your LinkedIn profile, was working at a high-precision zinc die casting factory. Yeah. So tell me what were you planning to do when you started out, and how did you make that transition into food?
Well, when I was at university, and actually I had already started on my general engineering course, largely because I'd done double maths, physics and chemistry A-levels, and I didn't want to be a mathematician or a physicist or a chemist, which is why I did engineering. That there was something called the Finiston report that came out that just said we haven't got enough managers in industry who've got engineering backgrounds. That people in engineering get promoted to their level of incompetence, and then we get arts graduates running all the factories. And so I think my ambition was actually really to run factories. I wanted to make things, and it was at a time when it was quite fashionable going into the banking industry, and I just felt, where's the satisfaction in banking? You haven't actually made anything. So I like making things and being involved in production. And then when I graduated with my production engineering degree, I applied to, the likes of Unilever and P&G and Mars and Coates Viella, and places where I understood their products. And I was actually tossing up between joining Mars and Coates Viella. And Coates asked me what, that at the time, that was Jaeger clothing. I thought I understood what they made. And they asked me, what would make you join us? And I said, I wanted to work overseas. And they asked me which country. And I said, Germany. And they said, done. So I went and worked for Coates. But they actually put me in their high precision zinc die casting factory, which made the zips for all the clothes.
Right.
That they bought the business that made the zips. Because they liked the technology. And by the time I was working in the business, it was exclusively making car parts. It was very, very clever technology. Yeah. And it actually got sold. It's been sold quite a few times, but I think principally now they make parts that go inside computers.
Okay.
So it was a fascinating thing to join, but I actually joined a business that I thought made clothes.
Amazing.
That was the production link.
Yeah.
And then I went back and joined Mars anyway. I stayed there for 3 years and went to Mars.
Well, excellent stuff. You must have come across some really great characters throughout your career, and there must have been people who've really influenced you, both from a personal and a professional point of view. Tell us about some of those people.
Well, I think my two main ones were both at Mars, and one of which was the Mars brothers at the time noticed that they were almost predominantly male at the senior levels in their business. And so therefore they were pushing they actually set everybody targets to get senior women into roles. And I was quite new there, and there was a senior woman there who was a great mentor to me, but they were big open plan offices, and I learned so much from her. She always pushed me and sort of told me that she thought I could do more, and she moved me from being as a production manager into marketing, and said, I think you fire on all 6 cylinders working in marketing, which was absolutely very true. As an analyst and creative and everything else, it was enormous fun. But I learned a lot from her because she was one of the first women at a more senior level, and she sort of became a bit of a man in a skirt. Do you know what I mean? So she wasn't being and I learned so much from the fact that we need diversity at different levels, whether it be in race or sex or whatever else, because we want the different behaviors. So I learned a lot from seeing how she was trying to cope, but thinking, I want to get to that level, but I can see what you're doing wrong. I think it really helped, but she was a massive supporter. And another person who's always blown me away was Alan Layton, who I worked for a while at Mars. And he is the leader that if Alan Layton told you could walk across that lake, you would walk across that lake. Wow. He just got people to do things. And he's somebody who I have always been hugely admire, and sort of look at him as a leader and wish I could have been more like him. Tried to adopt the bits that worked.
Well, I think everybody would definitely say you have been and continue to be an industry leader and inspiration to many people. So I think a lot of people.
There's lots of people I look up to too, though.
Well, I've definitely spoken to people who've named you as one of their inspirations. So absolutely. How do you see the sector changing? You must see massive change over the last few years in terms of the way the supermarkets have come on, how online's developed, the adoption of technology. Where do you think the sector is going to grow from here? Do you see a big player like Amazon coming in and really making? I mean, they are in, but could they go even bigger? Or do you see maybe more smaller, nimble operators making their way through the industry? How do you see it?
I think that when they set my role up as Groceries Code Adjudicator, there were only 10 retailers nominated, and they did not write that legislation recognizing that there might ever be another retailer that got to $1 billion turnover in groceries. It was not future-proofed. I think that they assumed that it would just be, this A would buy B, and that, everybody would just get smaller. So, the fact that Ocado, Home Bargains and B&M have been designated since then, and there's probably, you can see that if Amazon get to $1 billion turnover groceries, they will be designated as well. I don't think anybody expected competition to increase, So I think that's a good thing. I think that a lot of what I've seen, particularly in fresh produce, is how the large businesses are just getting larger and larger. And I think with a lot of the discipline of the code and the retailers following the code, but not only just in the letter of the law, but in the spirit of how they operate, has meant that many businesses have put more and more of their business into one retailer's basket. And I spoke to one fresh produce business that are 96% with one retailer. And the way they work, I was asking about consumer complaint charges. There are no consumer complaint charges. Consumer complaints are all monitored, but they're monitored for learning to inject back in the process to improve. It's not about, there's no funding stream there. It's all about education and learning. And I think that everything to do with how you treat consumer complaints or the forensic auditors I mentioned earlier, or forecasting, get any of those right and you are making for more efficient processes. And I still think there's some massive wins within our supply chain of everybody saying we are arm in arm here. We're all linked up. We're all in this together. And if you're hurting and something's going wrong, we can do something about it. And I see that as these people are getting larger and larger, they're much more embedded in each other. And of course, neither can afford for anything to go wrong. So you build in processes of what you do when things are going wrong to sort it out. So I think that the opportunity for anybody that is growing and is large already is enormous. But I think right at the other end, which I noticed when Ocado got designated, is their whole way that Ocado operate is allowing masses of new entrants a way to sell to the consumer, as does Amazon. And so therefore the opportunity for lots of small brands and small ideas and new ideas to get in front of the consumer is created as well. So, and of course, with the retailers getting more and more similar as they all reduce their range, they're all desperate for new ideas and new inventions, and in many cases sort of trying to almost say, because we're helping you grow, you're not allowed to sell to anybody else, which creates another challenge for any new entrants. But I suspect it's a problem that many of them are delighted to have, when you want to be in more retailers but you feel very linked to one. So I think that there's opportunities at the extremes, and I think that if Amazon does what Ocado has done in enabling so many new businesses to get to their marketplace, that can only be exciting.
Yes, indeed. Well, it's a wonder you get any free time with all these different interests that you have. But I gather when you do, you've got a particularly unusual and interesting classic cars. You drive them? Do you race them? Tell us a bit about that.
Not racing, but this is I feel a bit guilty because it's really my father's hobby. He's not with us anymore, but it's just becomes something that brings all of our family together. I have two siblings, one of whom lives in Hong Kong, and the other one was in Hong Kong for a long while as well, but we've always come together for the London to Brighton veteran car run, which my father always used to do. We've now got 3 cars between us, and the children are all driving them now. I suspect we'll probably have to get some more soon. But anyway, it's just become something that we share as a family. They are incredibly difficult to drive, and they're quite a challenge, and you need to understand them. And we take turns breaking down and helping each other. But they're a silly hobby, really. I mean, they don't go down in value like any other car that you drive off the forecourt. But it's a challenge and it's exciting, and the London to Brighton's always on the first Sunday in November, so you're very often cold and soaking wet as well. So it's just, bear in mind, I remember my father-in-law once asked me whether I had windscreen wipers on the car, and I said, John, I don't even have a windscreen. Just there, you've just got all the elements from the top and the front and every which way, and you have to be very careful driving in modern traffic. You've got to, you can't brake at the same speed as anybody else. So it makes you to better drivers. We actually have a 1910 Bianchi, which can't do the London to Brighton, which has never left the family since it was new. So it came down through a great uncle to my father, and now he left it to his 3 grandsons. And we were actually due to do a rally in the Isle of Man this year, but unfortunately that got cancelled. But it's something I think that it brings a family together.
Yeah, it sounds really fun. You mentioned your siblings, and I gather you've also got a sister who was a former professional tennis player. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, that's my younger sister, Joy. There's only the three of us, so my brother lives in Hong Kong. Yeah,
Yeah.
so Joy played at Wimbledon, and I went down to London for the first time a couple of weeks ago, which felt very odd for somebody that did it every week for 7 years. But to watch her, because Wimbledon's closed, that the members are generally never allowed to play on court one or centre court. But they got the lawns already, got everything ready, but then had no matches, so they were all being allowed to do showcase matches. So I went to watch my sister playing on centre court and then on court one.
Oh, that
And
must have been
actually,
a
to
real
be
thrill.
honest, she's still got a phenomenal serve. I took lots of slow motion pictures of her. You know, I say she played for England. She
Wow.
was
Yeah.
she was quite good, and she was playing at the same time as the likes of Annabelle Croft, which people my age will have know about. She played Hannah Mandlikova. I did watch her do that.
Oh, yes, I remember her. Yeah.
Yeah, and she played it. She lost to her. I think she got a few games off her, but you get a lot of money for being knocked out the first round at Wimbledon.
Yeah.
I'm being quite jealous at the time.
You get a lot of coverage on the BBC as well, I think.
Yeah, but she's also, it's quite interesting. She actually goes and does a lot of talks at schools about what sport taught her about leadership and management. And, it's sport is fantastic. As a way, it's actually trying to get people who recognise that they might not be top of the year academically, but actually by getting involved in sport, that they're learning a lot that will get them ready for the workplace.
Yeah, indeed. We're just about running out of time, but I do want to ask you, what's left on your bucket list? Have you got burning ambitions that you hope to pursue next?
No, I haven't. But I've always been somebody that's sort of waited for the jobs to come to me, or to read something that just inspires me. And I think the GCA has really given me a hunger for doing something that's going to make a difference. And I also would like, if I did the next thing, I'd want something that my children would look at me. And, my daughter says to me, we know what needs to be done about the environment. We know how the world needs to change, but you're the generation that's got the power to do it, which makes me feel a little guilty. And I'm thinking, has the GPA done anything for the younger generation? So, I think that it's got to tick those two boxes, I think, about making a big difference, and something that my children will be proud of me to do.
Yeah. Wonderful.
So I hope there'll be something.
I suspect you'll have the offers absolutely flooding in. So, Christine, it's been an absolute joy talking to you. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I literally feel like I could talk to you all day. You're such an interesting character. So thank you so much.
Yeah, so if anybody ever wants to chat to me about their career, you can find me. You just Google me. I'm very happy to have a chat.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Michael.